Be me, Roy. Just a regular guy, working a decent job in IT. Nothing special. I keep to myself, have a few solid hobbies, and a close circle of friends. For a while, I thought I had a good thing going with my girlfriend, Miriam. We'd been together for a couple of years. In the beginning, everything was normal, great even. We'd go out, have fun, share interests, the usual stuff. But over the last year or so, something started to change. She got really deep into online discourse. Every conversation we had started to feel like a lecture. I'd come home from work, and she'd be waiting to tell me about some new concept she learned. It was always about power dynamics, emotional labor, and my personal favorite, toxic masculinity. At first, I tried to be engaged. I'd listen, nod, and try to understand her perspective. I figured it was just a phase, a new interest she was passionate about. I wanted to be a supportive boyfriend. If I made dinner, she would thank me, but then explain how the societal expectation for women to cook is a tool of the patriarchy. I'd just be standing there with a spatula in my hand like I just wanted to make some spaghetti. If I held a door open for her, she would sometimes get a weird look on her face. A couple of times she told me it was a benevolent sexism gesture, implying she was incapable. So I stopped doing that. Then she got upset a few weeks later because I didn't hold the door, asking if I had a problem with basic manners. MFW. I can't win. I felt like I was constantly walking on eggshells. My natural instincts to be kind or helpful were being reframed as some kind of microaggression. It was exhausting. She'd send me articles and video essays to watch, all with titles like Deconstructing Male Privilege or Why Men Need to Do the Work. I watched some of them. It was all the same stuff, just repackaged. I felt like I was being treated as a representative for all the supposed wrongs of my entire gender. Me, Roy, the guy whose biggest thrill is finding a rare part for a vintage computer. Meanwhile, I was doing everything a good boyfriend is supposed to do. I cooked, I cleaned, I listened to her vent about her job for hours. I remembered all the important dates, planned our outings, and always made sure she felt heard. I was the one doing the emotional labor, but that term was only ever used to describe her own feelings. The double standards were becoming impossible to ignore. She could be moody and distant, and it was my job to gently ask what was wrong and give her space. If I was quiet after a long day at work, I was stonewalling her and being emotionally unavailable. She would talk for hours about her feelings, her struggles, her perspective. When I tried to talk about something that was bothering me, the conversation would somehow circle back to her within minutes. It was like my problems were only valid if they related to her in some way. Her friends were all exactly like her. When they came over, the apartment would turn into an echo chamber. They'd talk about how all men were trash, then look at me and say, "Oh, not you, Roy. You're one of the good ones." It never felt like a compliment. It felt like I was a pet they were patting on the head. My own friends started noticing the change in me. I was more tired, less likely to go out. One of my buddies straight up asked me if I was happy. I lied and said yes, because what else was I going to say? My girlfriend thinks my existence is a systemic problem, but the pasta she makes is pretty good. The whole situation was slowly grinding me down. I still cared about her, but I was starting to feel less like a partner and more like a live-in student in a class I never signed up for. And then we got to the final exam. It happened a few months ago. I came home on a weekday evening, feeling pretty good about the day. I was thinking about what to make for dinner. Maybe we could watch a movie later. She was sitting on the couch, waiting for me. No TV on, no book in her hand, just sitting there with an intensely serious expression. My stomach dropped. This was her, "we need to have a serious discussion" face. I put my bag down and sat in the chair opposite her. She took a deep breath, like she was about to make a grand proclamation. She told me she had been doing a lot of thinking about our relationship and about her own autonomy. She said that modern relationships are too focused on physical intimacy, a holdover from patriarchal ownership ideals. My brain was already turning into static. I knew this wasn't going to be a simple conversation. Then she dropped the bomb. "I've decided that I need to reclaim my physical and emotional space," she said, her voice full of conviction. "So, for the next 90 days, I'm instituting a no intimacy rule." I just stared at her. I must have looked like a fish out of water. I asked her to clarify what no intimacy meant. She explained it meant no physical contact beyond what you'd give a casual friend. No kissing, no cuddling, nothing. 90 days, 3 months. My first thought was that I must have done something wrong. I asked her, "Is this about me? Did I do something to upset you?" It felt like a punishment, and I had no idea what the crime was. She shook her head, almost looking disappointed in my question. "This isn't about you, Roy. This is about me. It's a journey of self-discovery. I need to know that our connection is more than just physical. I need to desexualize our dynamic to see if we can connect on a purely spiritual and intellectual level." It sounded like she was reading from a script. I tried to reason with her. I told her that physical intimacy is a normal, healthy part of a relationship, and that cutting it off completely felt extreme. I suggested we could talk about it, maybe find a compromise. Her face hardened. "So you're not willing to support me on my personal journey? You're trying to control my body and my choices?" Checkmate. She pulled out the trump card. There was no way to argue against that, without sounding like the monster she was always talking about. I told her it wasn't about control, it was about partnership. That a decision this big should be made together. She said that was just my male privilege speaking, that I felt entitled to her body. The conversation was over before it began. It was an ultimatum, not a discussion. Her final word on the matter was, "If you truly respect me and our relationship, you will honor my boundary without question." I felt completely powerless. She had framed it in a way that any resistance from me would be proof of the very toxic masculinity she was supposedly fighting against. It was a genius trap, I had to admit. So I just sat there and nodded. "Okay," I said. "I understand. I will respect your decision." She smiled, a genuinely happy smile, as if I had just passed a huge test. She thought we had just had a breakthrough. I felt like our relationship had just been put on life support, and she was the one holding the plug. The first few days were incredibly awkward. I'd wake up and instinctively roll over to hug her, then remember the new rule and stop myself. I'd come home and go to kiss her hello, then have to awkwardly divert into a weird half-wave. She seemed perfectly fine with it all. She was cheerful, almost glowing. She told her friends that I was being incredibly supportive and was doing the work to be a better partner. Her friends looked at me with a new level of approval. I was the good boy who followed the rules. Inside, I was miserable. It wasn't about the lack of physical contact itself. It was about the unilateral nature of the decision. It was the feeling of being completely dismissed. My feelings, my needs, my role in the relationship, none of it mattered. I was just an accessory to her journey of self-discovery. After about a week of this, I met up with my buddies. I didn't plan on telling them, but they could tell something was way off. I finally just laid it all out. The 90-day rule, the my body, my choice shutdown, everything. They were silent for a good minute, just looking at each other. Then my one friend, the most brutally honest one of the group, just laughed. He said, "So it's a test, right? She's expecting you to beg. She wants you to spend the next 3 months chasing her like a desperate puppy, proving how much you want her, so that, at the end of it, she can grant you the privilege of her affection." And when he said it like that, It was like a light bulb went on in my head. He was absolutely right. This wasn't about her journey. It was a power play. It was the ultimate test of compliance. She didn't want a partner. She wanted a subject who would orbit around her. Another friend chimed in, "You have two choices, man. You can play her game and be miserable, or you can just not play." I asked what he meant. "She set the rules," he explained. "She wants no intimacy? Fine. Give her no intimacy, in any form." She drew a line in the sand. Don't cross it. In fact, take 10 steps back from it and see how she likes the view. We talked for another hour, and the more we discussed it, the clearer my path became. I wasn't going to be angry or resentful. I wasn't going to be passive-aggressive. I was going to comply. I was going to follow her rule to the absolute letter of the law. I went home that night with a strange sense of calm. The game was afoot. The next morning, the change began. I woke up first, got ready, and left for work. I didn't wake her up or say goodbye. I sent her a text, but it was different. Instead of, "Hey, have a great day, love you," it was just, "I've left for work, have a good day." It was polite. It was informative. It was completely devoid of intimacy. At work, I focused entirely on my projects. I didn't text her during my lunch break to see how she was doing. Why would I? That felt like an act of emotional intimacy, and the rules were clear. That evening, I came home. She was on the couch, on her laptop. She looked up, expecting me to come over and kiss her on the forehead like I used to. I just gave her a small smile and a nod. "Hey." Then I went straight to my room to change and put my stuff away. I didn't ask her about her day. I didn't volunteer information about mine. Later, I went to the kitchen to make myself dinner, just for myself. I made a single serving of chicken and rice. She came into the kitchen a few minutes later, looking confused. "Oh, I didn't realize you were cooking. What are we having?" "I'm just making something for myself," I said, not looking up from the stove. "I wasn't sure what your plans were." The look on her face was a mixture of surprise and slight irritation. She ended up ordering takeout. We ate in the same room, but in silence. After dinner, I cleaned my plate, put it in the dishwasher, and went to my office to work on one of my hobby projects. I didn't suggest we watch a movie together. I didn't ask if she wanted to talk. I was just there, a roommate, a polite, quiet, and completely disconnected roommate. This was the pattern for the next 2 weeks. I was a ghost in my own apartment. I stopped planning weekend trips. I stopped buying her little gifts or snacks I knew she liked. I stopped initiating any and all forms of non-essential communication. All my texts were logistical. "I'll be home late tonight. Don't forget to pay the internet bill." The emotional side of our relationship, the part I had been single-handedly maintaining for months, was completely shut down. And the funniest part? For the first week or so, she seemed to love it. She told her friends that I was finally giving her the space she needed. She wrote a long post online about the importance of setting boundaries in relationships and how empowering it felt when your partner respected them. She was basking in the glory of her successful power move. She thought she was winning, but she failed to realize that I wasn't just respecting her boundary. I was building my own life on the other side of it. All the energy I used to pour into her, worrying about her moods, planning things for us, trying to navigate her ideological minefield, I started pouring it back into myself. I rejoined my old gym. I started going 3 or 4 times a week after work. I pulled out my old programming projects that I'd abandoned because I didn't have time. I started calling my friends and family more often, making plans with them for the weekends. My life, which had become so small and centered around her, began to expand again, and I was starting to feel good, really good. The constant low-level anxiety I'd been living with was fading away. I wasn't walking on eggshells anymore. I was just walking. The shift started to happen around the 3rd week. I think she was expecting me to start cracking by then. She probably thought I'd come to her, sad and lonely, and tell her I couldn't take it anymore, that I needed her back. That's when she would have the ultimate power to either grant my wish or extend my probation. But I didn't crack. In fact, I was thriving. She started to notice. One evening, she came into my office while I was working on a project. "What are you doing?" she asked. "Just working on some code," I replied, my eyes still on the screen. "You've been spending a lot of time on that lately." "Yeah, it's been nice getting back into it." There was a long, awkward silence. She was waiting for me to ask her a question, to engage her, to turn my attention to her. I didn't. I just kept typing. She eventually just said, "Okay, well, I'm going to watch a show," and left. I could hear the disappointment in her voice. The dynamic had flipped. For years, she had been the center of the universe, and I was the planet in her orbit. Now, my planet was spinning off into its own solar system, and she was left standing there, realizing the gravity was gone. She started to be the one to initiate conversations. She'd ask me about my day at work. I'd give her a brief, polite summary. It was fine, busy, solved a server issue. Then I wouldn't return the question. Why would I? Asking about her day was an act of intimacy. It was a way of showing I cared about her emotional state, and intimacy was off the table, per her own rules. I was just being a good partner and respecting her boundaries. She started trying to find ways to get my attention. She would complain loudly on the phone to her friends about something, clearly hoping I would overhear and come comfort her. I'd just put on my headphones. She started asking for my help with things she could easily do herself. "Roy, can you come open this jar for me?" I would go, open the jar, hand it back to her, and leave without a word. I was being helpful, but not emotionally engaged. I was a tool, a utility, which, ironically, is how she had been making me feel for months. The frustration was starting to build in her. I could see it. Her cheerful, empowered facade was starting to crack. She had expected me to be the one suffering, but I was doing better than ever. She was the one who was lonely. She was the one feeling the silence in the apartment. She was the one who had initiated a 90-day period of no intimacy, only to discover that she was the one who couldn't handle it. The irony was so thick you could cut it with a knife. The real turning point came about a month and a half in. I had just come home from the gym. I felt great, had a good workout. I was walking to the shower when she stopped me in the hallway. She looked at me, up and down, and said, "Wow, you've been working out a lot. You look really good." It was the first compliment she had given me in months, and it was a clear attempt to breach her own rule. It was a test. She was dangling a piece of intimacy in front of me to see if I would bite. I just gave her a neutral smile. "Thanks. I've been feeling better since I started going again." I didn't return the compliment. I didn't use it as an opportunity to start a conversation. I just acknowledged it and started walking toward the bathroom again. "Wait," she said. She stepped closer and reached out to touch my arm. The moment her fingers made contact, I took a small but deliberate step back. I didn't flinch or act disgusted. I just created space. I looked at her, then down at her hand, and then back at her face with a calm, slightly confused expression. "Is everything okay?" I asked. Her hand dropped to her side. She looked stunned. I was just," she stammered. I gave her a patient look. "I'm just trying to be respectful of the boundary you set, that's all. You said no physical intimacy." I said it in a perfectly calm, reasonable tone. I wasn't being a jerk. I was being a model boyfriend, according to her own new standards. I was holding her accountable to the very rule she had imposed on me. The look on her face was a masterpiece. It was a mix of pure shock, anger, and a dawning, horrified realization. The realization that her little test, her power game, had backfired in the most spectacular way possible. She had lost control, not just of me, but of the entire situation she had created. She just stood there, speechless, as I nodded politely and walked into the bathroom, closing the door behind me. I leaned against the door and let out a long, slow breath. For the first time in a very long time, I felt like I had my power back. And I hadn't gotten it by fighting or arguing. I had gotten it by simply agreeing with her. The atmosphere in the apartment after that hallway incident was ice cold. She didn't speak to me for 2 solid days. It was a heavy, angry silence. Very different from the quiet, peaceful silence I had been enjoying. I just went about my business. Gym, work, hobbies, repeat. I didn't push her to talk. I didn't apologize. What was there to apologize for? I was playing by her rules. When she finally did speak, it was an ambush. I was in the kitchen getting a glass of water, and she came in and just stood there, arms crossed. She told me I was being childish and cruel. She said that no intimacy was obviously not meant to be taken so literally, that I should have understood the nuance. I just looked at her and asked, "What nuance? You said no physical contact. You said you wanted space. I'm giving you space. I'm respecting your boundary. Isn't that what you wanted?" I was genuinely asking. I wanted to hear her explain how no actually meant yes, but only when I wanted. She got flustered. She said I was using her words against her and twisting her meaning. She claimed this whole experiment was meant to strengthen our emotional connection, but I had used it as an excuse to completely check out. I calmly replied that it's hard to build an emotional connection with someone who has put up a giant wall and explicitly told you not to come near it. I told her that an emotional connection requires effort from both people. I had been providing all that effort for years. For the last month and a half, I had stopped, and the connection vanished. To me, that proved it was never a two-way street to begin with. She hated that. She had no logical comeback, so she resorted to accusations. She told me I was emotionally stunted, that I was a perfect example of toxic masculinity, unable to handle a relationship that wasn't centered on my own physical needs. It was almost comical. I was the one who had spent years listening, comforting, and supporting. She was the one who had unilaterally withdrawn all affection based on a trend she saw online. But somehow, I was the toxic one. I didn't even argue. I just said, "Okay, if that's what you think," and walked away. Her little tantrum had zero effect. It was like watching a child scream at a brick wall. That's when her tactics shifted. If guilt wouldn't work, maybe jealousy would. She started talking on the phone with her friends, always a little louder when I was in the room. She'd laugh a lot and mention some guy's name. "Oh my God, Michael from work said the funniest thing today." She would casually mention that an old college friend, a guy, had messaged her out of the blue and wanted to catch up. She was watching me, looking for a reaction. A flicker of anger, a tightening of the jaw, anything. She got nothing. One time she told me directly, "Michael asked if I wanted to get drinks with a few people after work on Friday." I was reading a book. I looked up from the page and said, "That's cool, have fun." And then I went right back to my book. The silence that followed was deafening. I could feel her staring at the side of my head. She was expecting me to ask who Michael was, to tell her I wasn't comfortable with it, to show some sign of possessiveness. But I didn't care. Genuinely. The Roy from 2 months ago would have been anxious and insecure. But the new Roy, the one who had rediscovered his own life, just didn't have the energy to care about her manufactured dramas. If she wanted to go get drinks with another guy, what was I going to do? Tell her she couldn't? After she had spent a year lecturing me about control and autonomy, I was being the perfectly secure, non-toxic boyfriend she always claimed she wanted. And it was driving her absolutely insane. By the time we entered the 3rd and final month, the apartment was a psychological war zone. Her desperation was palpable. The games stopped. The veiled threats and hints were replaced with a sad, pathetic kind of pleading. She started trying to do things for me again. She'd make my favorite dinner. I'd thank her politely, eat it, and then go back to my own world. She'd ask if I wanted to watch a movie that she knew I liked. I'd decline, saying I had plans to catch up with a friend online. Every attempt she made to bridge the gap was met with a polite but firm adherence to the rules, her rules. One evening, she broke down completely. She started crying right there in the living room. She told me she missed me. She missed us. She said she made a mistake, that this whole 90-day thing was stupid, and that she wanted it to be over. This was it. The moment she was supposed to have all the power, the old me would have melted. I would have rushed to comfort her, told her it was all okay, and everything would have gone back to the way it was. But I wasn't the old me anymore. I sat there and listened until she was finished. Then I said in the calmest voice I could manage, "I understand that you're upset, but we made an agreement, and there are only a few weeks left. I think we should see it through to the end, just like we planned." I weaponized the word "we," as if this had ever been a joint decision. Hearing me say that, hearing me refuse to end the experiment that she had created, absolutely broke her. It was the ultimate role reversal. She was now the one begging for intimacy, and I was the one holding the line, citing boundaries and agreements. She looked at me with a kind of horror in her eyes. I think in that moment she finally understood. She finally realized that I wasn't playing a game anymore. I wasn't trying to punish her. I was just done. The 90-day clock wasn't a countdown to our reunion. It was a countdown to my departure. The last 2 weeks were quiet. She had given up. She was just drifting around the apartment like a ghost. She barely spoke to me. All the fight had gone out of her. During that time, I made my arrangements. I found a new apartment on the other side of town. I signed the lease online and started packing my things discreetly, putting boxes in the back of my car when she wasn't home. I packed my important documents, my sentimental items, my hobby stuff. I was detaching my life from hers, piece by piece. It felt good. It felt right. I wasn't even angry at her anymore. I just felt a profound sense of clarity. She had given me the greatest gift imaginable, a 90-day free trial of a life without her, and I had no intention of renewing the subscription. Then, the final day arrived, day 90. The experiment was officially over at midnight. On the morning of day 91, I woke up feeling a strange sense of peace. I walked into the kitchen, and she was already there. She had made a huge breakfast. Pancakes, eggs, bacon, everything. She was dressed up, wearing makeup. She smiled at me, a fragile, hopeful smile. "Morning," she said, her voice trying to be cheerful. I made breakfast to celebrate. "Celebrate what?" I asked, pouring myself a coffee. "It's over," she said. "We did it. The 90 days are done." I took a sip of my coffee and then sat down at the table across from her. I didn't touch the food. "You're right," I said. "It's done." And I have to say, it was an incredibly enlightening experience. Her smile widened. She thought this was the moment of reconciliation. "I really want to thank you, Miriam. Seriously." "You're welcome," she said, looking a little confused, but going with it. "No, really," I continued, looking her straight in the eye. "You wanted to see if our connection was more than just physical. You wanted to see if we could connect on a deeper level. Well, the results are in." I leaned forward slightly. "You've given me 90 days of clarity. You gave me 3 months to see what my life was like without the constant pressure, the endless lectures, and the feeling that I was always one wrong move away from being a bad person. You gave me the time and space to reconnect with my friends, to rediscover my hobbies, and to remember who I was before our relationship started revolving entirely around your ideology." The smile had completely vanished from her face. "For years, I put all my energy into you," I went on, and for the last 90 days, I put that energy into myself. And I've never been happier. My life is better. I'm healthier. I'm more focused. I'm more at peace than I have been in a very long time. She just stared at me, her eyes wide with dawning comprehension. You wanted to conduct an experiment on our relationship, I said, my voice steady and even. And a good scientist accepts the data, whatever it says. The data is clear. My life is significantly better without you in it as a partner. She started to shake her head, whispering, "No, Roy, no." You wanted space, I said, standing up from the table. You were right to want it, and now I'm going to give it to you permanently. Your 90-day rule was the best thing that ever happened to me. It showed me the door, and now I'm walking through it. I turned and walked toward the bedroom. She followed me, starting to cry. "You can't do this," she pleaded. "It was just a test, a stupid test. I love you." I didn't respond. I had already packed my last bag of clothes the night before. I grabbed it, along with my laptop bag. I walked to the front door. She stood in my way, tears streaming down her face. "Please, Roy, don't go. I'm sorry. I was wrong." I looked at her one last time, not with anger or hatred, just with a kind of sad finality. "The problem, Mariam, is that you don't think you were wrong. You just think you lost. Goodbye." I gently moved past her, opened the door, and walked out. I didn't look back. As I walked to my car, I could hear her starting to scream inside the apartment. It was a raw, ugly sound of someone who had played a stupid game and lost everything. I got in my car, put my bags in the passenger seat, and started the engine. I pulled out of the parking spot, and as I drove away, I blocked her number. I blocked her on every social media platform we had. A clean break. I drove for about 10 minutes, and then I pulled over to the side of the road, and I just sat there. I didn't cry. I didn't laugh. I just felt light. The weight that I had been carrying on my shoulders for years was finally gone. The constant need to please, to anticipate, to appease. Gone. The feeling of being judged and graded every single day. Gone. She wanted to start a 90-day experiment to see if I was worthy of her. But in the end, the only thing the experiment proved was that she wasn't worthy of me. And I have never, ever regretted that decision. My life has been my own ever since, and it's been pretty damn good.